According to a recent study, up to 82% of people struggle with imposter syndrome, feeling like they haven't earned what they've achieved and feeling like they are a fraud. Imposter syndrome, for you and for me, often feels like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Welcome to the Be and Do podcast. I'm your host, Yvann Karamoko, and each week I share a quick leadership thought to help you be the best leader and do your best work. This week, we look at an issue that affects leaders at all levels of their career, imposter syndrome. Life in the late 1800s and early 1900s in large cities like New York City often meant living in the increasingly popular tenement apartments. These flimsy apartments with very thin walls and not very thick floors were often the only way that some families could afford to live in the city. And despite the fact that they were very small, they often housed large families. Husbands would work very long hours and get home late and in a hurry to get to bed before starting a whole other day would begin to get ready for bed. As some recall, this process often meant starting out in a chair in the living room or wherever it is that they found space and taking off their very heavy work boots. As they would take the first one off, they would throw it and it would, sure enough, hit the floor. Now, if you were a neighbor to one of these men getting home from work, you were probably already sleeping. And after the very first shoe hit the floor, you were awake. And before going back to sleep, you would probably wait until the second shoe dropped before getting back to sleep. That's where we get the idea of waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for this inevitable thing to happen. If you struggle with imposter syndrome, it often feels like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, that you're waiting for the fraud police to show up at your door and tell you that you haven't earned what you've earned so far in your career, or even worse, that you are a fraud. If you've ever felt imposter syndrome, I want you to know and to realize that you're not alone. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, up to 82% of people have admitted dealing with imposter syndrome. Now, one of the misconceptions when it comes to imposter syndrome is that as you get further and further ahead in your career or in life, the feeling goes away. But as I've done some research around imposter syndrome, I've actually come to find that some of the most iconic leaders, actors, public figures of our day still struggle with this feeling that they have fooled everyone somehow and have gotten to these places in their careers without anyone noticing that all along they were a fraud. I want you to listen to some of the thoughts that many of them have shared. Business leader Sheryl Sandberg once said that there are still days when she wakes up feeling like a fraud. Writer John Steinbeck wrote in his diary in 1938, "I'm not a writer. I've been fooling myself and other people." Actress Lupita Nyong'o once said, "I go through acute imposter syndrome with every role. I think winning an Oscar may in fact have made it worse. Now I've achieved this. What am I going to do next? What do I strive for? Then I remember that I didn't get into acting for the accolades. I got into it for the joy of telling stories." Actor Tom Hanks says, "No matter what we've done, there comes a point where you think, how did I get here? When are they going to discover that I am in fact a fraud and take everything from me?" Nobel laureate Maya Angelou said, "I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out." Howard Schultz of Starbucks said, very few people, whether you've been in that job before or not, get into the seat and believe today they are now qualified to be CEO. They're not going to tell you that, but it's true. As you can see, the feeling doesn't go away the more that you achieve. In fact, it seems like after every promotion, that after every award, that after every accolade, you ask yourself the question, what am I going to do next? When are they going to find me out? One of the worst pieces of advice that we have given and received when it comes to life or professional career is this idea of fake it till you make it. Because what happened to all of us is we inevitably came to opportunities, came to situations, came to moments where we were unsure of whether we would be willing or able to rise to the challenge. Now, for some of us, we maybe felt prepared, but were afraid of what would happen. For others of us, maybe we weren't prepared, but it was our time and our turn to step up. Regardless of where we stood, many of us looked at our careers and building our lives around this idea of if I'm not sure, if I don't know, if I don't feel prepared, I just need to fake it. The problem with that is that many of us have made it, or at least are no longer at the point of our career that we started. And we've gotten to this place thinking that we faked it to get here. So no wonder we feel like frauds. Now, don't get me wrong. There are still people that are frauds, people that misrepresent who they are and what they can offer. That's not the people I'm talking to. I'm talking to the people that stepped up and led teams unsure of what the future outcome would be. I'm talking to people that decided to go back to school and finish that degree unsure of maybe how they were going to make it through with all of their other responsibilities. I'm talking to people that stepped up and have led, whether it's personally or organizationally, unsure of the outcomes, that showed up, that used the resources that were available to them, and that got the job done. If you are a part of that group, I would suggest that you didn't fake it until you made it. I would suggest that you showed up, that you brought your best, that you did what you knew to do, and that you led in the best possible way. But if we still hold on to the idea that somehow we faked it and got here, then we will ultimately always feel like frauds. Collectively, we have to stop sharing and receiving that piece of advice, because when we tell someone that they have to fake it until they make it, we are initially planting the seed that the only way to succeed is to be a fraud. And we have to also release the idea that we had to fake it until we made it, because you didn't fake it until you made it. You showed up, you did your best. Another reason why many of us are feeling like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop is because being a leader worth following requires inspiring a shared vision, whether that's to a team or leading yourself as an individual. The thing with vision is that it requires you living with two potential futures at once. That on one hand, there is the future that you are seeing, the future that you are imagining, the change that you see that you can make, that your organization can make by adding value. Yet on the other hand is the future where your vision or what you see doesn't come to pass. And so knowing that that future is possible, you may feel like a fraud because you don't know what is going to happen. And so your greatest and your best vision is still just that, a vision of what could be. It hasn't been tested. The world hasn't seen it. It hasn't added value to anyone just yet. And yet you need to walk forward towards it as if it already had. And to that, I would say your vision will always be just that. Even with the best research, the best preparation, it will at best be a hypothesis. Maybe a really good one, but it's just a hypothesis. Because vision is necessary, I would challenge you to approach inspiring a shared vision from the perspective that you don't know, but you're going to make your best effort to see what you already envision the world could look like, your future could look like, and your organization could look like. That doesn't make you a fraud. It makes you a leader worth following. For so long, the conversation around imposter syndrome has been centered around how to overcome it, how to get over the feeling that maybe I am a fraud, maybe I haven't earned this, maybe I shouldn't be here. I would posit that instead of trying to overcome it, we need to embrace it. What I mean by that is that the feeling of feeling unprepared about your new assignment or promotion, the feeling of not knowing what the future holds doesn't go away, because those things are constant in our lives and in our careers. But walking around waiting for the other shoe to drop takes away your attention from what you should be doing. It takes your attention away from leading well. It takes your attention away from dreaming. It takes your attention away from executing. If you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, there's less of you available to lead the way that you need to lead. I say, if the other shoe is going to drop, let it. I would much rather be found leading, creating, innovating, serving, loving people, and adding value to the world as an individual and through my organization than waiting around for something that may or may not happen. Here are 3 things to consider as you refuse to wait for the other shoe to drop. The first thing is acknowledge how far you've come. Whether you're just coming out of college and starting your career, have been in your field for 5, 10, 15 years, or at the end of your career, you are not where you started. And that required you to show up day in and day out and do what was required of you. The second thing is expressing gratitude for the opportunities that you've been afforded. That yes, you may have showed up, that you may have worked hard, but at some point in each and every one of our lives and careers, we realized that someone took a chance on us, maybe before we were ready, before we thought we were ready, before we thought we had everything that we needed in order to be successful. And each one of those opportunities have made us into the leaders that we are today. And gratitude allows us to step back and to see that throughout our lives, throughout our career, we've gotten some incredible opportunities to love people, to bring value to the world through ourselves and through the organizations that we get to be a part of. And the third thing is encourage someone to keep leading and to keep moving forward, even when they are unsure. As I shared before, most of us at some point and at some level feel like we are a fraud. And so that is the case for all of the people around you. What if you chose to be the encouraging voice that spoke against the voice that says you're not enough, you're not a fraud, and you're not going to make it? What if you were the voice that said, keep showing up, keep leading well, and keep doing your best work? Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Be and Do podcast. If you enjoyed it, consider sharing it with a friend or a colleague. Until next time, be the best leader, do your best work.